hope this is working, but yes, it is working. Thank you very much. Commissioner, thank you very much for this inspiring address. I mean, the way I read it is a call for a strategic perspective and strategic dimension in EU foreign policy and EU enlargement, as well as the neighborhood policy. I really like the phrase that you use, saying that Europe needs more than firemen, and in the current stage where we so much concentrate on addressing our own internal problem. With that, let me turn to Anna Palacio. Sorry. Europe needs more than firemen. The question is, do we have a good firefighting method? And are we in a current stage of concentrating on our internal issues? Are we able to think strategically?
Well, I think that the intervention by Commissioner Füle, heartens us, because I must say that for a long time, I had not listened anyone just in Brussels or Berlin speak about our projection in the Mediterranean, our neighborhood policy, eventually our enlargement policy. And I think we need that. We need some kind of not rational, but also emotional conviction that we can. I mean, that really we are in a difficult situation, but that Europe is there. So honestly, the Commission just going on thinking strategically about our neighborhood, about the position of Europe in the world, is a good thing. Honestly, what I see around us is that what we are living through is not just a Euro crisis, it's not even a Eurozone crisis, it's a crisis about our project, our European project, in the sense that what is felt today is that, let's imagine Greece leaves the Euro. Well, the European construction as we have seen it, as we know it, will disappear for two basic reasons. First, because, we have seen President Sarkozy campaigning on just denouncing Schengen. There are many tensions besides the internal market, and if there is if the European project is undone in an area, it will be undone by others in other areas. Schengen being one, immigration, of course, policy. We have seen when they were in Tunisia, there are tensions there. But it's not just that. It's that, honestly, if we don't have the euro, the internal market will suffer. We will deconstruct the internal market. The internal market will be deconstructed. And imagine Greece leaving the euro, and I will address Spain. It's not that I don't want to address Spain, but what will happen in the Balkans? What will happen in the tensions in the Aegean Sea? What we are seeing now that Cyprus, Turkey, all this will suffer, and what we have to be aware is that this crisis is an existential crisis of the integration project of the European Union. So this would be my first response. Do I think that we can overcome this? Absolutely, yes. I'm convinced. The problem I see is that we are bordering the abyss. And on this, I will take the example of Spain. In Spain, we have an immediate liquidity issue with our banking system. If we don't solve it, and it could be a matter of days, when we come when we have there's our fiscal compact. The fiscal treaty, when it's ratified by everybody, maybe it's too late. My concern is that events will precipitate a situation that will be beyond the point of no return. And this is what I would highlight from a starting point. I hope that there will be, as Commissioner Füle was asking for, a strategic vision, a vision that just encompasses all the European. Right now, the core of the issue is the Eurogroup, and that we will overcome the situation.
Thank you very much, Anna Palacio. With that, let me turn to Quentin. Anna Palacio spoke about the crisis of the European project. To have it addressed, it wouldn't happen without the Franco-German deal. And as we know, you're looking at that, you've been looking at that for a while. Do you see a workable consensus emerging between the two? Because what we really hear is that, the French recipe for dealing with the crisis is to splash more money. The German recipe is more austerity. Is there any way of meeting these two in the middle, in very short space of time? Meaning, because Greek elections, this is very soon.
Thank you, Marcin. Thank you very much for the invitation. We are in an extraordinarily difficult moment, and there are no easy answers. And so I hope nobody will think they're going to go away from this session thinking, hey, wow, we've got the answer. Anna and I have just spent the last 24 hours in Berlin at one of the most depressing events I think I've attended for a very long time, where everybody was talking about make or break moment for the European Union. There were various, in the course of one debate yesterday afternoon, the timescale that we had left to save the European Union appeared to begin with, we've got till the end of the year. It then shrank to we've got 2 months. And then I think there was even a vision that we've, well, perhaps just about got till the Greek elections, and then maybe 10 hours left. I actually am a passionate believer in the theory that the European Union progresses through crisis. And actually, it's only really through shake-up and crisis that the European Union goes forward. Štefan talked about the enlargement process. Actually, the enlargement process has been an amazing kickstarter to the European Union to get its act together and get going. But it's also an enormous challenge. I mean, just to touch on enlargement for a moment, and fascinating to hear enlargement brought back into the debate. I don't think the word was mentioned in the last 24 hours in Berlin. It was the euro, the euro, the euro. Enlargement, and that Big Bang enlargement, that moment of truth on May the 1st, 2004, when the European Union brought Europe back together again, really. It was an extraordinary moment of truth, but our leaders, I believe, made one fundamental error. On May the 1st, they thought the job was done. On May the 1st, the job was only just beginning. So in 2004, that huge enlargement of the European Union, and then 3 years later, this mega financial crisis. So 2 huge challenges hitting the European Union in a very short space of time. And that, I think, is the challenge that we're facing now to get up to. Now, Marcin, you put the question, in essence, can we get a consensus and can we get our act together? The pressures are enormous. There clearly is, what Anna has just described, an enormous pressure out there on this absolute keystone of the whole construction, the euro. And I think I would go along with Angela Merkel when she says, if the euro doesn't survive, Europe won't survive. So it is an absolutely fundamental challenge. Having said that, look at what's happened in the last 2.5 years since the crisis really broke. The European Union has demonstrated its weaknesses and its strengths at the same time. It has come together as never before. This may sound slightly superficial, but let me describe it just from the point of view of a journalist working on a newspaper trying to cover the story. Never before have I and my colleagues all around Europe had to cooperate so closely as we have in the last 2 years. We talk to each other suddenly now every single day about what's happening in each of our own territories. Now, go back 4 or 5 years, none of us ever bothered to talk to each other. We just talked to London, or in this case, in the European Union, it might be Brussels. If it was a European story, Brussels did it. Suddenly now, because of this crisis, what is happening in every single country matters to every other country. We have to understand each other's domestic politics. So the politics of Spain at this moment are of absolutely vital importance in Berlin, in Paris, in Rome. They are actually of vital importance in London too, but I'm afraid the British don't understand that, but we'll put the British to one side. Within the core European Union, there actually is, I think, a dramatic moment where everybody is realizing that each other's business is everybody's business. We're all watching at the moment to see what on earth is going to happen in the Irish referendum yesterday. We're waiting for the results. Even now, it's on, I think it's going the right way, but it's a critical moment and it matters to us all. So this is driving us towards finding a solution. The problem is whether we can find that solution fast enough to head off the pressure of the markets. And finally, Marcin, I'll come perhaps to your question of this. In a way, this if you like, the Franco-German divide, which is also a wider divide in Europe, it's also the north-south divide, the divide between is austerity the answer, is growth the answer? And of course, it's a false question. They are both part of the answer. And somehow we have to reconcile that. Now, purely in terms of where we are today, I'm an incorrigible optimist. I actually believe that this relationship that has been rather foolishly called Merkozy, Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy, was a disastrous relationship. It was a really bad one. They didn't get on very well. They didn't like each other very much. And the prospects for Angela Merkel and François Hollande getting on are much better. These are two fundamentally pragmatic people who want European solutions. Mr. Sarkozy was an extremely unpredictable person who just liked having summit meetings and then producing instant ideas like rabbits out of a hat. The Merkozy relationship was deeply unbalanced. It was fundamentally Angela Merkel deciding the policy and unhappily and unwillingly, Nicolas Sarkozy going along with it. So now we have a prospect of a much better balance in that debate, a balance where as long as François Hollande doesn't sort of fall back into very old-fashioned recipes, I think this balance between growth and getting our budgets under control is the key to everything. And that is going to be a much more sensible debate in the next 6 months, if we've got 6 months, than it has been before. So I'll just finish it there. I am actually really quite hopeful that it's going to get better if we've got the time, and that's a big if.
Well, thank you very much, Quentin. Let me turn to Elmar, Brok. We are already on the German perspective. We will ask you, sir, to carry on that. I mean, I think that the last few years have really shown that the pivotal role of Germany, I mean, everybody always knew that Germany was absolutely pivotal in the European integration process, but since we started with the enlargement, I think it's important to stress that that process would have never happened without the German advocacy. So the big bang that we had on the 1st of May 2004 was a process advocated by Germany with a strong German leadership. Now we have another challenge, the EU crisis, the Eurozone crisis. Again, that would never be resolved without the German leadership. Is Germany prepared to move beyond the rhetoric of austerity? Is there any other strong argument in the German debate which can drive, which can find a solution in the current crisis?
Yeah, I have to defend now Brussels against this German appeal. To start with your last point, I think it was always Angela Merkel's position, not just austerity. It's the question of fiscal solidity, structural changes and growth, and also regulation of financial market, that such a thing as 2007, 2008 happened to us cannot happen again. It's not just a sovereign debt crisis, it's also the crisis coming out of that financial disasters because the global markets were not regulated in a certain way. I believe we need all of that together. And if you look really into the cases, what is done in Spain and Italy, what was asked for Greece, it's less cutting the budget, it's the structural changes. You can put money only successfully to create sustainable growth if the structures are there which can create sustainable growth. And this, I think, it's a condition. And that's the difference to the American approach. They do not solve anything in budget, they do not do structural changes, they solve it by printing money. If we come through this crisis by this method with these different goals, Europe will be stronger in 2014 than ever. But whether we come through, I do not know. And that's the point what we have. Always in the European integration process, we had a legal framework, treaties, where we knew that this was not enough. And then it came the next step forward. But now we have reached a level of integration. And we see in this crisis that this level of integration is not enough, but the next steps become decisive ones. The next steps forward for more Europe means really going to the sovereignty of member states. That is now a decisive step, a higher quality of European development. And that is the question whether in this moment we get the support of the nations for that. And here's one difficult point. I think Štefan said it before as he talked about the point of no return. We are already over the point of no return, but we do not know that. If I see the challenges ahead of us, from globalization to energy security and so on, everyone knows, looks to the case that no nation state can solve it alone. But also the integration is already so deep. If someone would like to leave, he's damaging himself more than anybody else, but also he damages all the others. So we are deeper in this integration process. We cannot go back without damaging whole Europe and every single nation. But to make that clear to us, it's important that we come to 2 points, which is now in this fiscal crisis. The first is asking some countries for more solidarity. This more solidarity means to give up a lot of budget authority at the end of the day. And the others ask to keep the rules. But keeping the rules and controlling from Brussels, it's also a deep decision against national sovereignty as it's seen until now. And we have the strengths on both sides, on the countries like Germany, Netherlands, Finland, and the others, to have this more solidarity, and it's seen as in a common interest that in other countries the rules are kept. And only if that 2 things come together, we will have the solution for that, what we have to reach in a few weeks, months to do that. That's not much time. And therefore this, I think it's a point, Europe will decline, and economically it will become a disaster very fastly if we have not the strength for that. Or Europe will go these important steps forwards for more Europe that we come forward with. And that's an interesting point. In Germany, some of the academic people in the economic field, people in Berlin, in parliament and so on, very reluctant with that. But if you look into opinion polls in Germany, the vast majority of Germans is asking for more Europe in this time because they have understood that it cannot be done anymore. And therefore, I think we have to make it much clearer that we need all these points together in order to solve the problem. I think then we can make it.
Thank you very much, sir. I think with that we perhaps will turn to the audience, though I think that Anna Palacio would like to reflect immediately on what was being said.
Elmar Brok has said something on which he's absolutely right. For Greece, for Italy, I'm going to speak for Spain, the structural changes that Rajoy's government has undertaken are not because of Brussels, are not because of Berlin. We need that because of the competitiveness. Of course, speaking about Spain, these changes are changes we knew we had to address since the transition, since the late 70s. We knew we had to do that. And sometimes some German friends tell me, well, you know, but hadn't you been pushed to do them, you wouldn't have done them. I'm not sure. Spain has changed a lot. Spain was an underdeveloped country in the early 80s. And Spain is a success story. With Singapore, Hong Kong, and Ireland, we are the countries that in the second half of the 20th century have increased their GDP per capita in an astounding way. And of course, for Spain, this has also been a matter of joining the European Union, and we know that. So on this, I fully agree. And I fully agree that the European Union, but also the Southern, because it's absolutely true what Quentin is saying, that what we perceive now is a divide between North and South. After all this crisis, if we overcome it with the euro, with the European project, the project will be much stronger. But what I also want to underline is the time. I mean, honestly, what will happen if Greece becomes a failed state? And as I said, on terms on geostrategical terms for Europe, Europe started because we didn't want another war in our geography. I mean, I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I think that once more, this crisis is about much more than the euro. It's about our project, our stability, and the problem is time. We need to take some decisions because, okay, we have yesterday, President Van Rompuy said, well, you know, Spain has to do its homework. We are, but you know what? If some decisions are not taken until we finish our homework, maybe these decisions nobody needs to take them because there will be nothing on which to take the decision. So this is the danger, not being aware that put all the pressure, put everything, but we need to know where we are going. The Spaniards are undertaking a lot of sacrifices, but we need to tell them, you know what? After all this, we have this integration treaty with these benchmarks. And we are working in order to fulfill these conditions. We have done it once. We will do it once again. But we need something. We cannot just be told, do your homework. Okay, we do our homework. But you know what? We need some decision, and we need them fast. And this is true for Spain. Of Italy, we are speaking less, but the situation of Italy is in many respects much more complicated than the Spanish situation, and of course, Greece. Wait until the Greek votes. Okay, I mean, we can wait, but maybe, you know what, the situation is not going to be very different, and we have to understand that.
Can I very quickly just pick up on something?
I thought that maybe we engage Quentin audience now, and I think we already have a lot of issues here on the plate, and we will come back to you as well as to Mr. Brok on the issues of whether we really have enough time for a deeper structural reforms that you were talking about. Now, let me take to Rafał Trzaskowski, member of European Parliament, and then later on here. So.
Yes, I'm a member of the European Parliament. I serve with Elmar on the Constitution Committee, and I have a question to Quentin as an impartial observer. I wanted to ask you about the danger of fragmentation of the European Union. I mean, I think that what we've done with the fiscal pact, not many commentators have seen it. I mean, we actually fended off that danger of actually creating new institutions and fragmenting Europe. And here, European Parliament, for example, is working hand in hand with the Polish government. We had exactly the same priorities. I've met some friends from my old days in the think tanking world who are always supporting enlargement, always supporting the strengthening of the European Union. And they said to me during a discussion, if the price to pay for saving the euro, which is the most important, is permanent fragmentation, we have to pay it. I hear my friends on the Constitution Committee, Federalists, who say that we even should have 2 budgets, and so on and so forth. Do you think, in reality, that this is the price worth paying? And if the danger of fragmentation of the EU, and I'm talking about a permanent fragmentation, even creating new institutions, is really real in front of us? Thanks.
Quentin, would you like to take it now immediately?
No, I'll take the other one. So essentially the fragmentation you're talking about is the Euro 17 and the 10, 11 outside, yes? Yeah, I mean, in a sense, core Europe. And whether a certain core Europe is inevitable. I see the question in a way under 2 headings, because the truth is that the outsiders to the Eurozone are in 2 groups. There are those who want to be inside, or at least feel strongly enough that they are happy to go along with the degree of integration that you're going to get inside. And there are those like Great Britain who actually probably don't want to be inside and would be very happy with a fragmented European Union. Actually, your question gives me the chance to pick up on Elmar's point that I was going to pick up on. Because the logic of solving the Eurozone crisis is, I think, without doubt, much closer integration in the Eurozone core. And as Elmar said, there is a clear majority in Germany in favor of doing that. And Germany is actually prepared to put its money on the table if that integration happens. I believe Germany will go along with things like Euro bonds if there is much closer integration within the Eurozone. The first problem is, can Germany persuade the other members of the Eurozone to go down that route? Can Germany persuade Spain, Italy, France, above all France, that actually closer integration is absolutely essential and needs to be done very quickly? And then the problem comes, your problem precisely, if you've got a much more integrated Eurozone, how the hell do you stop the wider European Union falling apart or strains growing within the internal market because of much more harmonized fiscal policies, harmonized taxation, those sort of things happening within the Eurozone? And I think, I mean, Štefan, I would love to hear, in a way, what you've got to say about that strain, because you're working in an integrated institution right across that divide. And I think it's going to be a very difficult divide to handle, because I think it's absolutely inevitable, exactly what you say. If we're going to have a functional, sustainable, stable Eurozone, it's got to be more closely integrated. So how do we do that without creating a greater divide? I haven't got the answer. Have you, Štefan?
Thank you, Quentin, for making the matter simpler. Kalman Missei here.
What I am to say first echoes what Anna Palacio said. I find a fundamental fallacy in the argumentation which says, if we have gotten the time, I mean, how much evidence we need to get convinced that we actually haven't gotten the time. So I think the debate, any meaningful debate on on the euro crisis, and then I will go to how does it reflect in an area I know a little bit about, the Eastern Partnership area. But the debate has to start from the question, how can we, what are the measures that Germany and others need to get to the point of a joint underwriting of the of parts of the sovereign risks, so that underwriting parts of the debt. So that is really the because we just don't have the time, and very, very bad processes are happening, and now it's 5 countries, and it's, you know, if it doesn't happen, we will not be able to cope with it. So we need to get to the point where solidarity reflects in underwriting sovereign risks across the. And I know I'm totally aware of the moral hazard that Germany is so afraid of, and rightly afraid of. But we just cannot cope with this without urgently in the next weeks answering this question. And then what I would like to say, and of course it's a great pleasure to hear Štefan Füle, whom I have had the privilege to work with, and also to see how fantastically he's working in the Commission for at least the part that I have seen, the Eastern Partnership countries. I think we have a real big problem there too. Moldova has, is our wunderkind, our success story. But we actually, when we look at the opinion polls there has been, in the last 1 year, a very large shift towards integrating with Russia rather than with us. And why is that so? Because we are not appearing a liberal partner to. We have to understand this brutal truth that in some ways, such as the visa issues, such as labor, Russia is becoming a more liberal partner than the European Union to countries like Moldova and Ukraine. I'm exaggerating the point, but it's really very important to understand that this bureaucratic stranglehold in which we are, it takes forever to get visa-free regime to a country which obviously, whose citizens obviously will get in anyway through Romanian citizenship. So it's just a nightmare, and of course it's a nightmare to, I am sure, to Commissioner Füle also, and it's really the member states, but also free trade. Free trade is a win-win to everybody. With Ukraine, a free trade regime is a win-win to everybody. It's taken forever to get there, and also with Moldova. So I think the two things are interrelated in a sense that if Europe can reform itself and can really get through this crisis, a lot of energies will be liberated for again becoming a much more attractive partner to.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I see here two major issues. Let me turn first to Elmar Brok, then to Commissioner Füle. I think that Mr. Brok, there were lots of issues here regarding whether the perception of whether we have enough time is how urgent it is really. Do we have enough time? Probably not. Is it true would you agree with what Quentin said, that there is a consensus in Germany for closer integration and even for the acceptance of Eurobonds? But with that come a question, really. Eurobonds when? At the time when we are really, really needing them in the short space of time in the next few months, or are we talking about some end results in a year's time when it might be too late? And with that, later on we will turn to Commissioner Füle. Yes.
Thank you very much. I think democracies have a problem in timing. We have the Greek elections, we have the French elections, and I think Quentin was right as he described the possible relationship between François Hollande and Angela Merkel. But the public movement towards that can be not done in fully by Hollande before the general elections in Spain, in France. And that is, election time is a problem in that, and therefore we have to take that into account. But I'm totally sure his judgment that it comes closer. Merkel was never just austerity. And this question, austerity or growth, was always the wrong question. And I think this will be reconciled, and I hope in a good way. Which instruments? Look, there is already an incredible movement if you see the German debate. That after the political decision on the fiscal compact, European Central Bank gave 500 billion euros to markets. And after the 30th of January, as the fiscal compact was negotiated in detail, another 500 billion euros. And nobody complained about that seriously in Germany anymore. A year ago, it would be impossible It would have a big scandal. So it's a certain movement in such a direction. Nobody objects no project funds. Nobody's saying anything against the stronger role of European Investment Bank. I'm relatively sure that in a quite short time we come to this proposal of the resumption fund, debt resumption fund, which is an important step, which is easier for the Germans to take because it has a time limit of 20 or 25 years, but it will help the countries with high sovereign debts to solve the problems, has near the effect of Eurobonds. And if you look into the decision of the CDU Party Congress in November, which was influenced in that stage by Mrs. Merkel, there is not the CDUs against Eurobonds. It's written the CDUs at this moment against Eurobonds. It's a Party Congress decision led by Mrs. Merkel. And this question is, first, which impact has it on interest rates in the beginning for Germany? And secondly, is such a Eurobond an instrument that nobody will do structural changes anymore? If these two questions are answered, then I think the way could be free for the Eurobonds. And therefore, this is a development in a certain direction, but you have also to see, you have to explain it to your own people. You have to get a majority in the parliament for such things, as everyone else with structural changes has to do. And if I can make a short remark on that, what is with the division of Europe? I believe we have to stick together. First of all, only if we keep the 27 or so many want it. We can, via the normal community method, we can decide in normal legislation with majority. Everything else is intergovernmental and anonymity. Stronger role of the Eurogroup by anonymity is less effective than to keep the European Union together, not to fragment it, because then we can much faster do legislation which is binding for the member states and not has to be ratified in every national parliament, which I think is it's majority voting. That I think is a decisive moment. And secondly, if I see, for example, the courage of the Polish government in the last day for this pension legislation, then I see that as a preparation to be part of it. They do exactly that, what Anna has told Spain already should have done, to prepare for that, to be more competitive, to play a role in that. And many of the non-Euro countries do it, some of the Baltic states and others. And therefore, I think relative optimism that we have not a permanent fragmentation. It's what the law called the avant-garde solution. The Eurogroup go forwards, people in countries who want to go forward, and the others will follow, and most of them will follow because they have no alternative in the interests of their countries. And we have seen it with the fiscal compact. It was not a 17, it was a 25, and Britain suddenly saw that they had not divided Europe, that they had isolated themselves. And I think that was, a very good step forward to get credibility for the whole enterprise.
Thank you. Commissioner Füle, would you like to comment on what you heard from Kalman, but also there was a question there from Quentin directly.
And the answer is about, number one, a sense of the belonging, I will explain, and also the importance of the sovereignty issue and regaining the sovereignty. I'll explain one by one. Moldova. If you ask in the Central Europe, and the Czechs, I guess, are not really very specific in this regard. So if you ask the Czechs how they feel secure under the current political circumstances and compare it what was before '89, interestingly enough, almost a quarter would say that they felt more secure under the previous regime. Guess what kind of result you would get if you ask in Moldova and Ukraine, the countries with a different historical experience. The problem in Moldova is not necessarily that Russia has a certain offers more attractive than ours. It has a cheap gas and all, and it helps them to cheat on the values and principles. But the problem in Moldova is the sizzlers between the reforms on one side and the lack of the inclusivity of the reforms on the other side, the polarization of the society, that needs to be addressed. But for that to be addressed, they need to have a sense of belonging, okay? If I was at least a little bit right about the effect of globalization and what we face, the country like Moldova, or even the country of Ukraine, you know, you need to have a certain group of the countries, an institutional framework to belong to. But what we are doing, we're telling these countries Eastern Partnership should be enough. Yes, there have been some progress. Last year, the Commission has put down the wall between the Eastern Partnership and Article 49. For the first time, we issued a document which, as the Lisbon Treaty actually referred to Article 49, you could hardly find any other EU document than the document on a new neighborhood policy, which was bold enough to refer to Article 49 of the Lisbon Treaty. But it's now the time for the member states to deliver and make a case for countries like Moldova that there is a sense of the belonging, that if you deliver, you will belong, you know, to this group. You will be a part of it. You will not be left between us, the European Union, and between those in the East. And you will not be pushed to look for this kind of strategic partnership anywhere else than in the heart of Europe. So that was the case I was trying to make. Now, coming to the first question, when I'm getting the question whether I can imagine Turkey in the European Union, and some are even asking the European Union about Ukraine, I'm saying, yes, absolutely. But it will be a different Turkey. It will be definitely a different Ukraine. But it will be also a different European Union. You know, by training, I'm a diplomat, but I guess even the diplomats could be sometimes clear in trying to say something. I hope, in my humble address this morning, I was trying to put the two things together. Multi-speed Europe and a compatibility and parallelism in us moving on the roadmap and through the action plan towards the fiscal and economic union, banking union, and at the same time to push forward the enlargement. Because if I look at the requirement for the newcomers, and if I look at the acquis in the making, you could hardly expect the countries of the Western Balkans being ready at this point of the time without any reservation to commit themselves to what might be the acquis in half a year, in 2 years' time. And again, this issue of sovereignty, something, I mean, also in the Central Europe, we felt very strongly. You cannot give them the sense of the freedom, these countries, getting rid either of totalitarian regimes or a bigger framework like Yugoslavia was. And at the same time, negotiating with them, actually handing over the sovereignty to the extent you cannot actually tell them, you know, what will be the case in a couple of years. So the time has come for us to rethink, reflect, and be bold enough to say, hold on, in stages, okay? Let's talk about what is there as far as acquis now. once you reach that, let's then move to other circles. And eventually, if it fits your ambition, your willingness, and your readiness, to the core group. But to come to the countries like Montenegro, Kosovo, and saying you could make it as a member of the European Union only if you commit now that you will become a part of the core group, because this is what the rules of the games are now being set out. I think we fail. We will fail. So I believe that as we strengthening the integration within the Eurozone, as we create this variable geometry within the European Union, I think we need to give the candidate countries the possibility to make the best use of that variable geometry. Otherwise, we use them even before we start a serious process of bringing them on the board.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that perhaps we take a few more questions from the floor at the same time now. Let's start from here.
Actually, could we have a little more light on there? Because we can't see who's asking questions. Let's see.
Can we indeed? I mean, I can't
I don't
see
know if
anything.
it's possible. A little less light on the platform, a little more light in the auditorium.
Just wait a second.
Yeah.
Sir.
My name is Samir Radwan. I'm the former Minister of Finance of Egypt. And I would like, if I may, to shift this Eurocentric debate a little bit towards the South. Certainly, the debate is very important for us in the South, because 40% of our trade is with Europe. The majority of our investment is with Europe. So it's one and the same story. But I would like to turn to Commissioner Füle and ask, this is strategic thinking, which certainly we welcome. In precise terms, what does it mean for the Arab Spring countries? We know that the Union for the Mediterranean is dead, literally, because one president is in prison, the other president has gone. The neighborhood policy, from our perspective, is diluted. It does not focus on southern Mediterranean as such. When I was in Deauville over a year ago, the G8 promised tremendous support, which gave us a lot of courage. But a year on, very little has come towards the South. So do you have any concrete proposals? Is it within your strategic thinking? Because I believe that the South is part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. And the gentleman over there with the white piece of paper? Or no? No longer a white piece of paper, right? Gentleman.
Good morning. My name is Walter Jurasek. I came from Washington, D.C. It is fascinating topics which you talk about it. However, I have some problem to understanding between globalization and localizations. I do believe that localization is very powerful, has a lot to say. And another thing is, we're missing the human factor. Under the socialism, looks like we're going to be welfare system, because many immigration, for example, immigrants from East Europe go to West Europe for one reason, together get a welfare and state and get the freebies. So I believe that we have to look at refocus what we are going to do in European Union, because I observe constantly that this trend going toward government spending, and government spending. When we are we're going to look forward, that we have to check it, how we're going to distribute the money accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Fran Barwell here and Janusz Onyszkiewicz.
Two questions. Fran Barwell from the Atlantic Council. Commissioner Füle, I think it's very interesting the way you've put forward the idea of a multi-speed Europe not being taboo. But when you talk about accession countries not necessarily having to subscribe to everything, but maybe not agreeing to be in the core group when they're first negotiating, how would you define the core group? Do you think, for example, that they can say, I'm sorry, we don't know if we'll ever go into Schengen, or I'm sorry, we don't ever know if we will go into the euro? Some of these obviously will require treaty changes. Or is it something else? Is it that we can have more opt-outs the way the Danes have on ESDP and some other things? You also mentioned that you had discussed this, or that you had discussed with your colleagues the need for integration and enlargement to be an equal part or a strong part of this discussion, even though you're in the midst of the Eurozone crisis. And I wondered if you could perhaps say what the reaction was, and whether you think that there is a desire to kind of restart the accession, the enlargement discussion, because looking at this from the American perspective, and partly it's the fault of our own media, what we hear all the time is the Eurozone crisis, the Eurozone crisis, the Eurozone crisis, not the other half of what you've put forward, which I think you're absolutely right. This is one of the huge success stories of the EU, and there are opportunities now, but they're being not dismissed, but they're being kind of overlooked. And then for Elmar, if you could comment perhaps on the Hollande-Merkel relationship. I think Quentin's comments about this being potentially a very good relationship. But my question is France itself, doesn't matter about the personality of François Hollande, is France itself strong enough economically to stand up to the Germans and say there needs to be more of an emphasis on growth? Or is it too weak, or perceived as too weak economically, that the Germans see themselves as the ones who must set the economic course? Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Minister Onyszkiewicz.
Well, thank you. Well, I see that the discussion about Europe and the problem of Eurozone and the Euro crisis completely overshadows another issue, which I think is quite important. Well, Europe must be an actor on the international scene, must have sort of common foreign and security policy. And so my question is, to what extent we can really move forward in creating common, really common foreign and security policy in a situation of the Euro crisis, and also in a situation when Britain takes a sort of a standoffish position on Europe, because creating common foreign and security policy without Britain is impossible. So how we can sort of square this sort of situation? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think we'll come back to the panel now. Let's start with Anna Palacio. And please pick whichever question you want to answer.
I would like to comment on something that Elmar said. I think that unfortunately now the speech has gone to morals. I mean, there is a Germany bashing from the South, and there is all kind of comments on laziness of the South by Germans. And I think that we have to get out of this moral discourse. This is extremely important. And honestly, I mean, if you have seen declarations by Prime Minister Rajoy, he never mentions the Eurobonds, because in Europe we have to understand that you have to get your solution, but you cannot push for a solution that really is a big issue for another member state. In this case, I think that the Eurobonds is just one aspect, but there are others. What we need today is really that the markets believe when Angela Merkel said, we will do whatever it takes to stand by the euro, that this she meant it. And I believe it as Quentin said he believes her. I do believe her, but the markets obviously do not. And what we need is a very strong act that establishes where we are going in Europe. My second comment is on the Mediterranean. Of course, the southern border of the Mediterranean is absolutely fundamental. But honestly, now here, our panel was about the future of Europe, and the future of Europe is linked to the Mediterranean. And you are absolutely right that it's a region where Europe has to project in a more rational way. I think, among other things, the idea of integration in the south, of infrastructural integration, of trade integration, the southern countries, Egypt, all of them, Mashrek and Maghreb, all the countries are on a kind of radial, bilateral relationship with the European Union. And everybody agrees that if for instance, just to take one example, if the border between Algeria and Morocco would be open, there would be at least two GDP points for each side. And you are absolutely right that the European Union must understand that the big issue in the southern border of the Mediterranean it's about jobs, 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 giving this youth, this bulging generation, a future. I think that at the same time as this is an issue about the South, we need more from the European Union. We need more legal security. We need, as I said, better intra-regional relations. All this are aspects that have to be addressed by these countries that, as yours, are going through a period of upheaval. I think that this expression of the spring was not a very happy one, or at least a very realistic one. What we are seeing is the Arab upheaval. The spring is another issue.
Thank you. Quentin, would you like to pick up also any of these questions?
Is this the one that works? Yep. I'll do my best. I mean, in response to the first question, about Europe being so inward-looking, or our debate being so inward-looking, I fear it is absolutely inevitable at a time like this. There is a financial crisis in Europe. I mean, let's be honest about it. The rest of the world is screaming at Europe to get its financial crisis in order. And so somebody like Angela Merkel, somebody like Mario Monti, are spending almost every waking minute of their day worrying about the euro crisis. And it does mean that the focus on the rest of the world gets put in second place. Now, that is a tragedy. I mean, the Arab Spring is this enormous event right in our backyard, in our neighborhood. And it is a huge challenge for Europe, I think, to make sure that the Arab Spring is that precisely, is a spring and not actually a disaster. I mean, it could go any way. It's a revolution. Just like the revolution in the former Soviet Empire, it could go very well and it could go badly wrong. And Europe's got to invest in it. It's got to put real money where. But hang on, where's Europe's money at the moment? We're desperately trying to prop up Greece and Ireland and Portugal, and we hope we won't have to put more money into, other countries like Spain and Italy. So there are real demands on that money. I mean, Štefan was saying there is money there for the neighborhood policy, but I suspect it's got to be much, much more. So we are trying to learn how to think and chew gum at the same time. It's not always easy, particularly for men. So perhaps, Fran, we need more women in the political debate who can do these things. The core group of Europe will define itself, I think. The core group of Europe is partly, Elmar calls it an avant-garde. It's a slightly dangerous concept because I believe that, Well, let's be absolutely blunt. I think that the euro was probably launched too soon. It was launched too soon because there was a passionate commitment to go in this direction from France and Germany. It was Helmut Kohl and François Mitterrand together with Jacques Delors really had this commitment. And maybe it came too soon because Europe wasn't ready for the political union that was an essential underpinning of it. And that's precisely the challenge we're facing today. How do we create that political union when actually our own voters, our own electors, don't really relate to it yet? And yes, it's an elite project. It is an elite project, but perhaps we will never move forward in history without elite projects. These, leadership comes from the top and not from the bottom. Anna asks for vision. Vision comes from the top on the whole, not from the bottom. And finally, the thought about a common foreign policy, which comes back in a way to the first question. And is it possible, as long as the Brits are so, just so hopelessly semi-detached? The British are in a very nasty psychological situation at the moment of total insularity. They are run by a very small-minded and inward-looking government. Thank God it's a coalition, because at least the junior partners in the government look outwards a little. I come from a very strong conservative tradition in my family, and I look at this party with absolute dismay as it looks inwards. My hope for Britain is that actually the constitutional debate that is taking place in Britain about potential devolution, even independence for Scotland, may shock the English, who are the problem in Britain, shock the English into realizing that they are Europeans and not just little Englanders. But at the moment, I don't have a great deal of hope. So my answer would be this: Europe has got to do the best it can in a common foreign policy with the British semi-detached. The British do have a global vision, a global perception. But this government came into power and they said, right, we're not going to go down the European foreign policy route. In fact, we're going to drag our feet on most things. But equally, we're not going to go down the transatlantic policy route. We're a bit nervous about the Americans. Relations aren't that good. We're going to engage with these new emerging powers, China and India and Brazil and so on. Russia is a rather notable case where the British engagement has not been very successful. The truth is that in none of those countries are the British alone regarded with any seriousness at all. The British are only serious if they engage with Europe. All governments in Britain eventually come to that realization, but it takes them a long time. So I regret to say I have gone native in Germany.
Very much sounds like that, Quentin, to be honest, but let's hope for the English shock. And let's pass the floor to Elmar Brok. There are lots of things on your plate, of course. I don't know which one you want to pick of them, but naturally, a lot of comments related to the domestic scene in Germany and ability to address the crisis.
Thank you very much, but let me make one short remark to the southern neighborhood policy. It's again the question, well, how can you give money if the structures are not there? Who should be the partner in Egypt in the last year to do reform programs? Money is a lot of there. It's a lot of money there. We have not to look for more money. But it's also a structural point. You talk about 40% of the trade. But only 15% of the trade is done between the northern African countries, between themselves. There is a question of growth. They have to stick together. We talk about the increase of the old colonial trade lines. And the place of growth is there, do it between themselves. That is one point. We can give incentives for their infrastructure, but we should do it more. But that's just one answer to that. The question what is done with this welfare state. I think in Germany, the welfare state was not invented by Karl Marx, but by Otto von Bismarck. It was a conservative project. And not everything what has to do with welfare, it has to do with social protection. This has to do with a decent human standard of living. It has to do with communism. Market is not everything. We believe in socially orientated market economy. The market is the best place to create values. But it needs a framework that is a decent life possible. There is the possibility to control markets that they do not destroy themselves. And therefore, this question of regulating the financial markets, which is not anymore doable on the national level because it's a European and global market, we need rules there in such a framework. It's like here in the football championship, a football match without rules and referees do not work. It's the same with the markets. And I think this we have to take into account. The question of what has to do here in this sense with France and the economic strength of France. I think France has the root of changes too. If François Hollande believes he can cut down again the pension age, then it's a measure in the wrong direction. I defend, as I said before, the welfare state, but it has to meet, for example, the demographic developments. And in the past, you had to pay for 6 years pensions and the people were dead. We have to do it now for 20 years. And by the shrinking young population in most of our countries, and that we have to adapt to that, have these values together with economic feasibility. And here I think we will have an interesting debate in France itself, and this is one of the decisive points. I'm for such a socially oriented market economy, but under the conditions of today, not under the conditions of 30 or 40 years. Therefore, we need this modernization. And I think France will make it, because France has no other choice. And as a member of parliament, I can sometimes a little bit undiplomatic. François Mitterrand needed 2 years until he had to understand that a national socialist way for France did not work and that it had to be saved. François Hollande has time until the next European summit. Then the market will answer if this is not properly done. And therefore, I hope that France will do it and that we have a close cooperation here. And that is not a question of is Germany or France stronger. It's a question of cooperation. It should not count in the future who is economically the strongest country or the weakest country. That this is a question of solidarity together, that together we are very strong. Because even the strongest is not strong in a global level alone. And this has to be understood by the weakest and by the strongest country in the European Union. That's all what about it. But let me make one last remark about these questions with core group. I believe that every new country has to accept the full acquis communautaire, fully. But there might be transition periods. It cannot be implemented from the very beginning by everyone. It was always done transitional periods. We had these solutions, for example, with Schengen and Euro. But it's not only there, but it has to fully accept the acquis communautaire. And countries who not want to do that and are not able to do that for a moment, we have to build a ring, not within the European Union, we have to build the ring outside. What we do now with association agreements, with free trade areas, is the right approach to come forward. And there might be also an intermediate stage like the European Economic Area, the Norwegian solution. And then from that, go to the step to the full membership. If we have the Norwegian solution, European Economic Area, they have 70–80% of the acquis communautaire on board. And the step to the final step is then relatively easy. Austria, Finland, and Sweden did that. And, but to have that fight then within the European Union, that would break the European Union. And then you have, at the end of the day, real directorates, a real core group, and members of second and first class, and that is not very good. And therefore, I think this must be done in a ring around, not in a ring within.
Thank you, Mr. Brok. Let me turn finally to Commissioner Füle. Naturally, the question regarding the South, also the common foreign security policy. I don't know whether you want to comment on other issues here.
Elmar, to a certain extent, you're right when you're saying that moving from the European Economic Area into the European Union, it's easier. I've been in Iceland just last week. It does not make the process easy. There are other issues. But one of them I have faced was when the Prime Minister quite clearly asked me, listen, we had a certain vision, a certain ambition when we applied for the membership, joining the Euro. What is there for us as far as the current and future discussion about the Eurozone? And this is a question which is being posed not only by them, but also other candidate countries. And coming back to the UK, if we're serious about the Eurozone, strengthening its integration, getting closer to each other, I think we will have to accept that it will have certain consequences on how the London see the place of the city in this overall game. And this is probably what will make the politicians in the UK to think about being fully engaged in the EU affairs a little bit more innovatively. Also taking into account that as far as 2014, there's going to be a new rules of the votes as far as qualified majority vote. And for the first time, the members of the Eurozone would have the ability actually to overvote the rest of the members. Those are, important issues need to be taken into account in the discussion in London. Coming back to the South, I tried to be as explicit as I could be about the South and what is there for the South. No, the Union for Mediterranean is not dead. It has been dead for a number of the years. And now we are trying to revitalize it. The fact that we have a new Northern Co-Presidency, the European Union, the High Representative, it means that we brought the Commission, in that game, ending up this senseless discussion whether the Union for Mediterranean is an intergovernmental project or not. And for the first time, getting the best from both the intergovernment and community approach, and focusing the work of the Union for Mediterranean again on the area where it could where it has the biggest value added. And this is a sectorial cooperation, while the Commission, my colleagues, have a lot to offer. We have also the Secretariat in Barcelona in full strength with the newly dedicated Secretary General. For the first time, we could combine the ability of the Secretariat to turn the ideas into bankable projects to the benefit of the population of the Southern Mediterranean, and not fish for those projects elsewhere, but take them from those sectorial discussions and cooperation among the members of the Union for Mediterranean. Yes, we're looking for the South to nominate its co-presidency. There are discussions with one country, and I hope the announcement will be made sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, we have already started to work on actually the Union for Mediterranean delivering on the original expectations, which have not been there. But I think we are now much more closer to deliver on them. Neighborhood policy is not a diluted policy. There is a difference between the development policy and neighborhood policy. We have put the neighborhood policy on this more for more principle and many other principles. Actually, if you look at our new neighborhood policy, we have taken into account not only the lessons learned from the past, we have taken into account also the new instrument for the external policies, but we also reflected on the Arab Spring. And that explains why, for example, in Tunisia, we have doubled our assistance, while in Tunisia, we have many, many programs. And at the same time, in Egypt, this is actually the only one of the few countries which has not yet benefited from any top-up money. yes, we have redirected a lot of grant money, which is part of the regular annual programs, to meet the needs of the country nowadays. But there are still a number of the issues which prevent us sort of to use, you know, the potential of the new neighborhood policy and instrument to the full extent. And I hope that the second round of the presidential elections would get us closer, and also that the military would deliver on their commitment and would pass the power. Without that, it would be extremely difficult. I agree with you that some of the signals, like the Double Partnership, about 35 billion of dollars, you know, it looks very good on the paper. If I, you know, started to dig in what is there, what we could use for our neighborhood policy, and I have not really found that much. You're absolutely right. But that makes the European Union neighborhood policy so unique and so strong. That also explains why we have asked for the next financial perspective a 40% increase of the resources. And one more element, the United States have, of course, their own policy toward that region. It took them some time, I mean, to make their new priorities in the light of the Arab Spring. And interestingly enough, they are bringing now a new money, particularly for Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya. Quite interestingly, based on the European Union approach, more for more. Treaty changes. The fiscal compact itself foresees the countries later on to join them. If you look at what the Commission has adopted this week in the framework of this country recommendations along the EU semesters, you will see this chapeau document on the growth, which says that working on the roadmap and action plan to bring us to the fiscal union, we need to tackle also the legal issues. And we need to do it through the political process to avoid any democratic deficit. I think it was very clear reference to the openness of making the changes also there. Now in the college itself, I don't need to restart a debate on the enlargement. I mean, and this is something you yourself said at the beginning. The enlargement process is stalled. Why are we saying that? Is it really stalled? Croatia is about to make it. Candidate status for Serbia this year. Montenegro, in a 1 month's time, we start the accession negotiations. Turkey. Okay. Albania, hopefully, if they deliver on the list we have discussed with them, might receive a candidate status this year. The Turkey, it's a difficult process, but the Turkey is not the only country in an enlargement. We have not been able to open any chapters the last 2 years, but through the positive agenda, we try to find a new positive momentum and put the accession negotiation back on the start. But the point is whether there is a consensus for, you know, addressing these new horizons in the enlargement policy. And there I have to accept that the debate is only to start. On the common and foreign policy, there is obviously a lot to do. But if you look at the past, 2 years, 3 years ago, at the state of our foreign policy, and if you look today, us being much more coherent, us addressing the protracted conflict within the overall framework of our foreign policy, us not making a difference between the intergovernmental approach and community approach, and elaborating on the union approach, us strengthening the importance of the EU delegations in the third countries, and those EU delegations and not the delegations of presidencies actually coordinating the work and the policies of the EU towards that third country. We're doing a bold steps here too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm afraid we have come to the end of our panel. I think that we dealt here with two very difficult questions, very difficult to find a reinforcing link. On one hand, you know, we have dealt with the issue of how to sustain our transformative power. On the other hand, how to fix ourselves. And some may say that there is a contradiction in that. I think we need to find a clear and obvious link, and I'd like to thank the panel to make a way in making that happen. Multi-speed Europe, which was an idea mentioned here by Commissioner Füle, might be a solution. We here in Poland are not so keen on that, but perhaps we should consider that as well as other solutions being proposed at the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for your presence. Please thank the panelists.